Remember what Benjamin Franklin said when they asked him what kind of government the Constitution gave us. And he said, it's a republic if you can keep it. A republic as opposed to a democracy. A republic means that individuals act for the good of the nation. That's what sovereignty is about. That's what nationalism is about. These aren't bad words. These are embedded in the traditions of our nation. And what keeps it alive is the fight of individuals to reflect not only the principles of the founding fathers, but to act for the good.
Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. It's Sean from SGT Report here with a very important update that I scheduled just a week ago with our friend Harley Schlanger. This is a political call to arms. On Monday, the day before the U.S. midterms, it's time to take our country back. Harley joins us now. Harley, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be with you.
Glad to have you, sir. Hey, I want to just get your thoughts on this. The midterms are tomorrow. It's very important that people get out and vote. In fact, it's never been more important, in my opinion. And our political adversaries would have us believe there's going to be a blue wave, when in fact, I think all evidence supports a red wave, not only in this country, but around the globe. People want to take their countries back, Harley.
You're absolutely right. This is the most important strategic election that I can remember in my lifetime. Largely because there's been an effort underway for 2 years now to carry out a coup, not just against President Trump, but against the American voters who put him in office. And this is a coup that, thanks to the courage of Trump, is now being exposed. And there was collusion with a foreign government, but it wasn't Russia. It was the British and British intelligence who were colluding with a bunch of treacherous elements in the Obama administration, the Clinton networks, people like Brennan and Clapper, Charles Schumer, who were trying to overturn an election. You know, I find it ironic the Democrats keep saying the Republicans are trying to suppress the votes and are acting against the electoral process. Well, what is Russiagate? Russiagate is an attempt to use a fraudulent narrative cooked up by the highest levels of British intelligence to overturn the vote in 2016. So you're absolutely right. People have to go out and not just vote, mobilize everyone you can. Don't allow people to fall back in complacency or in pessimism and say it doesn't matter. It matters tremendously, because if the blue wave does materialize, and it could, including the possibility of vote fraud in some places, but it could materialize, and that would mean we'd be back in the dangerous days of Obama and Hillary, with Trump either on the verge of impeachment or neutered by the opposition. So it matters, and people have to take the situation into their own hands. And as you said, it's part of a global shift that's occurring. But we've got to make sure in the United States we do our job and break the back of the City of London Wall Street operation.
I want to ask you about military tribunals, the military court of law versus a traditional civilian court of law. I know that you saw the exchange between Senator Lindsey Graham and Brett Kavanaugh during the hearings. They spoke about military tribunals, essentially. And I just interviewed Dave Janda, and Janda says that the possibility of military tribunals for those who have been seditious or treasonous against the United States and our Constitution is very, very real. He believes that they will happen. He said that exchange between Graham and Kavanaugh was unprecedented in the history of Supreme Court justice hearings. So your thoughts on the possibilities of military tribunals for the very people that you just cited as being treacherous and seditious against the Constitution in trying to topple our sitting president with this Russiagate fable?
Well, I think Dave Janda is a very insightful person and has some good sources. To me, I don't know enough to say for certain that this is something that will happen. What I do know is that if we back up the president with the vote tomorrow, the possibility exists to break the power of the so-called deep state, or the imperial forces, the geopolitical forces of the neocons and the neoliberals. So what's the advantage you have with the military tribunal is that it's less influenced by so-called public opinion. But more importantly, we have to win public opinion over, the way that Trump did it, the way that he did during the election. the way that he does when he goes out in these rallies and has very large rallies, whereas the rallies for Hillary Clinton, the number of people could fit into a phone booth. So whether it's through military tribunals, whether it's through congressional action, because all of these guys, Brennan, Clapper, Rosenstein, all of them, Comey, they lied to the Congress. That's a crime. And the Congress could enforce it. The Justice Department could enforce it. What's been lacking is the intention to do it. And if Trump has that intention, and we have popular opinion backing him up, at least a significant vocal minority in this country supporting it, then we'll end up with these people prosecuted for their crimes. And they've committed a multitude of crimes.
Let me ask you this, Harley. From your perspective, what do the Democrats have left to sell to the American people? When you think about policy, when you think about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and what it takes for us to have a sovereign nation, borders, what do these Democrats have left to sell to the American people beside fear and loathing, open borders, and freebies?
Well, we saw in this congressional election, the only thing they're running on is that Trump is no good. Trump is a racist. Trump is a misogynist. You know, the charges against Trump, besides being completely false, are just completely absurd. And you know, the fact is that what are they doing? They're appealing to the narrowest form of tribal politics. And if they succeed, the nation is going to fall apart, because you can't run the United States as a coalition of angry women, depressed African Americans, enraged Hispanics. It doesn't work. You have to have some common policy that binds the nation together. Economic growth, real jobs, taking control back from the big banks and the Federal Reserve and the Wall Street crowd. And that's the potential that we have if we can defeat the blue wave tomorrow. And if we can't beat them tomorrow, we have to beat them over the next 2 years, because we can't, in defeat, hide our heads and run away in fear. But the important point you're making, Sean, they have nothing. They have no leaders. You know what, Joe Biden, Hillary saying she might come back, Chelsea Clinton saying she's considering a political career. They've got no one. Michelle Obama, or Mike Obama as some call her. You know, so where is the leadership? Where are the ideas? They don't exist. They're using hatred. And it's ironic, isn't it, that that's what they accuse Trump of doing.
Well, that is the ultimate irony. And I note that in video after video after video. That's what CNN specializes in, that and bearing false witness. They bring guests on constantly who do nothing other than bear false witness. Case in point, creepy porn lawyer Avenatti. I mean, his name was actually being bandied about as being a presidential candidate. I mean, can you imagine?
Well, Sean, let me give you an example of the complete hypocrisy. Hillary Clinton talking about civility. Her campaign hired a top-level British spy, Christopher Steele, to run stories, to write memos claiming that Trump was in a hotel room in Moscow cavorting with prostitutes who were urinating on a bed, maybe on him, with Putin filming it. And that's what Russiagate started as. Now, is that civil? Does Hillary have a leg to stand on when she talks about Trump not being civil? So the hypocrisy is glaring. But we can't just get angry at the hypocrisy. We have to get focused on why they're trying to pull off this coup. The fear of the establishment is that Trump was going to break with the policies of the last two presidents, of Bush and Obama, which include globalization, free trade, shutting down American industry, the destruction of physical production in the United States, the opening of borders, the forcing the United States to go into a post-industrial zero-growth economy because of the shutdown of our industry and energy production because of the fraud of global warming. That's the direction they were taking us. And on top of it, the direct confrontation with Russia and China. Trump came in and said he's not going to do that. And the American people responded because we were tired of war. We were tired of being told that a bubble that was making Wall Street rich is economic progress. We were tired of being told that if we have industry, it's going to burn up the planet. So the American people responded to Trump. And we've got to keep that mobilization going. And as I think is important for people to reflect on, even if the blue wave happens, which could happen, it doesn't shift the world's strategic situation because the rest of the world is rebelling against their own Hillary Clintons and their own Brennans. You had Brexit. You had the election in Italy and Austria, which is anti-European Union, anti-Brussels, anti-City of London. You had the Mexican elections, the Brazilian elections. You have the German elections, where Merkel and her party and her coalition partners, the Social Democrats, are dropping to the lowest levels in their history in the percentage of the vote. So there's a global insurgency. And Trump was riding the crest of that to become president. We've got to keep that going. And nothing that happens on Tuesday should stop the American people from demanding justice against these criminals and these swindlers and these predators. And at the same time, going back to an economy based on physical production where every American has an opportunity to do something productive for the future and to leave a better world for their children. Under a Hillary Clinton regime or Obama or Biden or any of these characters, the best future you could offer them was you're not going to have much of anything, but at least you'll be equal. And that kind of equality is not something anybody should desire.
Yeah, you know what? I don't see any evidence whatsoever of a blue wave. We see evidence of people walking away from the Democrats because of their Marxist, far-left, insane George Soros, Hillary Clinton policies. We see African Americans walking away as they recognize that that party has never done anything good for African Americans.
What a group!
We see far more evidence of a red wave forming. And around that red wave is a very dangerous N-word, and that word is nationalism. Trump has been using it repeatedly, calling out the globalists and saying there's a very clear choice here, and it's the choice between nationalism, which equals sovereignty, and globalism.
Do you want to further clarify what nationalism means to you?
To me, I don't have to clarify. It means I love the country. It means I'm fighting for the country. I look at two things, globalists and nationalists. I'm somebody that wants to take care of our country because for many, many years, you know this better than anybody, our leaders have been more worried about the world than they have about the United States, and they leave us in a mess. Whether it's the wars, whether it's the economy, whether it's debt, whether it's all of the things that they've done, including putting in the wrong Supreme Court justices, and we've really put two great ones in. No, I'm proud of this country, and I call that nationalism. I call it being a nationalist.
I have never in my lifetime heard a president use those words, especially as it pertains to the American people and their sovereignty. It really is at this point us versus them. It's us versus the globalists, the bureaucrats in Brussels, and we see Merkel losing her chokehold on Germany. I think there's a global rebellion, a global insurgency is the term you've used, and it's a global rejection of globalist policies. We're on the cusp of great things happening for this planet.
It's a completely new era, Sean. And just to add to what you're saying, the globalist policy for the United States is to reduce people to the most narrow interests, almost tribalism. You know, women, Black women, Hispanic women, white women. You know, the way they've organized their campaign is to try to put together a hodgepodge of every identity group with an argument that Trump is against that particular group. Now, Trump's idea of a robust nationalism is that there is an American interest, an interest that serves the needs of all the people, but that it's not very clear to most people because of the lying fake news media and the corruption of politicians who have accepted huge sums of money to promote this tribalism. And the tribalism goes along with the climate change propaganda and the idea that if you have air conditioning, you're starving an African, you know, this kind of nonsense. So what Trump has said is that we can have prosperity based on physical production. And unfortunately, he's been stopped in some ways on his economic policies, not just because of Schumer and others, but because of the neoliberals in the Republican Party. He used the Kavanaugh case very effectively to hammer the Republican Party into shape. And I think it's important. Politico newspaper or magazine or whatever the hell it is today had an article lamenting that the Republican Party is now the party of Trump, whereas previously it was the party of Bush. It was the party of John McCain. It's not anymore. And so you're right, Sean, a clear signal has been sent out that there's a new America emerging. And it's emerging based on the traditions that gave us strength in the past. Most importantly, the commitment to science and technology and equality and freedom. And that if we can get that across to enough people, because there are a lot of people who are now awakened, but they've got to understand that the enemies of this country are not just bad people, they're committed to an evil that is mostly unknown and unseen. Now, the fact that they're working through these secret services to support the terrorists in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, that was the Obama policy. That was the Hillary Clinton policy. And when Michael Flynn blew the whistle on that, look what happened to him. He got targeted by this fraud Mueller. Look at the fact that the Obama administration brought into power in Ukraine a neo-Nazi military wing that controls the Ukrainian government. And when the Trump campaign came out against providing lethal weapons to Ukraine, the person who was advising them on that was Paul Manafort. Look what they did to Manafort. So they've targeted key people who had these insights about how a nation should function. And that's why this coup has to be beaten. The most important thing is to vote to defeat the coup. You don't like some things Trump is doing? Fine, we can change that. But what Trump has done is something no president has ever done. Stood up in the face of a deep state imperial geopolitical assault and called them out and mobilized the population against them. And I think this is why they're so hysterical and so desperate. And just one other note on the blue wave propaganda. The main evidence of a blue wave is the same newscasters who predicted Hillary was going to win in 2016. They're falling all over themselves, predicting that it's going to be a big Democratic sweep. And I would urge one note of caution here. There are still areas where the Democratic Party has the ability to carry out vote fraud. So we've just got to be very vigilant going into the election tomorrow and coming out of it.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I want to ask you before we part ways is you really hit the nail on the head when you mentioned the fact that the right and left, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, were essentially two sides of the same coin. And Trump has really changed that. And we see the deep state in a panic because of that. And what I want to try to quantify for people is the fact that I had rejected the Republican Party entirely under the Bush regime control of that party, the Cheney regime, the Bush senior CIA regime. The Bushes created the Clintons, I always like to say, because of the Mena, Arkansas CIA drug running when Bill was governor in Arkansas. You said here earlier in this interview that these people are committed to an evil that is mostly unseen. A very, very powerful and important statement. What I'd like to do before we part ways, Harley, is have you quantify for us, again, you already did to some extent in this interview, but quantify for us that evil. Because as Q has said, QAnon, which I believe is a white hat group connected, very closely connected to our president, the white hats in the military that have stood with the president against this coup of the deep state. The deep state now in the wide open, we can see these people, we can name them, we now know who they are. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, had her shadow government, she called it, set up on the 7th floor of the State Department. That has been dismantled. Quantify for us this evil, this hell on earth that would have been under a Hillary presidency, according to Q.
Let me just say that I think that the LaRouche movement has a record of identifying these networks and associating them with the zero growth globalist movement that goes back to the British royal family, the City of London, Wall Street, the Rockefellers, that these were networks that believe that human population growth is the scourge of the earth and has to be not only stopped, but reversed. And they've conducted policy, whether it was the 1980s project, the Global 2000. They keep changing the name of these things. Paul Ehrlich's population bomb.
Agenda 21.
Yeah, but what they're committed to is a satanic policy of reducing human population. And some of the people who work closely with the Merkels and the Clintons and the Obamas include people like Bill McKibben of Middlebury College, who has argued that we shouldn't have more than 1 billion people on the planet. Well, what are you going to do with the other 6.5 billion people? You have people in Germany who are promoting the shutdown of industry, the shutdown of nuclear power, coal, the fossil fuel industry, getting rid of diesel engines, getting rid of the automobile. These are people who are on record around a guy named Schellenhuber, who, by the way, works very closely with the Vatican. Schellenhuber said there should only be 1 billion people on the planet. That means that the people who are developing the policies, the anti-industrial globalist policies of the Clintons and the Bushes and the Theresa Mays and the European Union and the Merkels, are genocidalists on a scale, what is it, 100 or 1,000 times worse than Hitler. 5 to 6 billion people, they're saying, are too many. That's why they're not afraid of nuclear war. They think they'll get into their bomb shelters and the world will have a massive depopulation and they'll be able to come out 2 years later and live the life of Riley. So we're talking about an actually unspeakable evil. And that's what some people sense when they saw a Hillary Clinton campaign, but they didn't know the details. Why? Because we're being bombarded all the time with lies such as carbon dioxide is a poison. Well, who produces carbon dioxide? Human beings when we breathe. Carbon dioxide feeds trees. Trees use it to produce oxygen. This is such a scientific fraud, and Trump just recently called them out on this. That's why he took us out of the Paris Climate Conference, one of these other globalist monstrosities. So people should really study in detail what the International Monetary Fund represents, the central banking system, the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank. These are agencies to promote a destruction of humanity by destroying the physical production that's needed to provide for a growing population. And that's what the Trump resistance represents, an opposition to this anti-human policy.
It's exactly, it's a pro-human approach to politics. That is what Trump is doing. It's pro-humanity versus anti-humanity, which is the people you've just described. And to take it one step further, look at the Georgia Guidestones, which in their own words says they want to reduce the population of the globe to 500 million people. Harley?
Yeah. So this is, and this is something that we've targeted going back to LaRouche writing in the 70s against the Club of Rome, against the International Monetary Fund, against the Kissinger policy, the Global 2000 policy that was being brought in by Jimmy Carter. So all the information is there. But what happened is that with Trump's fight against Brennan and Clapper and the Democrats, we were able to open the window to send some light on the core of this, which is the British Empire. The British Empire has always been a genocidalist empire. It was the Bushes and the British who put Hitler in power. It was the British who were responsible for the war that just ended 100 years ago, World War I. Why? Because they didn't want Germany, France, and Russia working together because it would undermine the power of the British Empire. So instead, they launched a meat grinder war that killed millions of people. And they're hoping we'll sleepwalk into World War III. Well, Sean, thanks to people like you, thanks to the presidency of Trump, thanks to the work that my organization, the LaRouche organization, has been doing for 40 years, this is now impossible to cover up. And I would encourage people to get in touch with me if you want to fight this, if you want more details. I do a weekly column. You can write to me at harleysch harleysch@gmail.com. That's harleysch@gmail.com. And I'll send you a link to my blog. The important thing is we need to take the people who are waking up and give them the in-depth understanding of the strategic fight. Because as people wake up and start replacing anger with strategic thinking, the enemy will be crushed.
All right. Last word. I just want to share this with folks. Many of you already realize this. When you think about this unspeakable evil aligned against humanity that Harley has just outlined, it helps you understand why vaccines damage our children, why there's glyphosate in our food and in our water, why there's so many things wrong with our world that could so easily be fixed. And now we have someone in the White House that is using the N-word, nationalism, sovereignty, liberty, the Constitution. All of the pro-human words that we would want to hear out of our leader are coming from this president's mouth. So for those of you who are sitting on the fence and are still not sure who to vote for tomorrow, I want to remind you of one last thing. Harley, you and I have heard so many people we respect, say in the past, no one is coming to save us. And I've made the point time and time again that we're not asking anybody to save us. We're just asking for a level playing field so we can save ourselves, because the deck has been stacked against us and people all over this world for far too long. So your final thoughts on the importance of the midterms tomorrow and getting out to vote for a candidate who is pro-human.
Remember what Benjamin Franklin said when they asked him what kind of government the Constitution gave us. And he said, it's a republic if you can keep it. A republic as opposed to a democracy. A republic means that individuals act for the good of the nation. That's what sovereignty is about. That's what nationalism is about. These aren't bad words. These are embedded in the traditions of our nation. And what keeps it alive is the fight of individuals to reflect not only the principles of the founding fathers, but to act for the good. And the good will always exist in the universe, but without a force behind it, it's a dynamic that can be defeated. But if we have this unstoppable dynamic around this global insurgency, the rejection of the globalists, the rejection of the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bushes, as well as the Merkels and the Macrons and the Mario Draghis from Italy. And when we see other countries in Africa and Asia trying to develop, looking to us for help, we have a responsibility to act as true Republicans with a small r. That is, people who will protect and save our republic. And that's what I would urge people to do. Become part of that American system.
Very well said. Democrats equals democracy. The word CNN constantly uses in their guests. Republicans equal republic, at least under this president. Our guest has been Harley Schlanger. Harley, thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, and guys, thank you so much for tuning in. For real news 24/7, visit us at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda and lies. God bless, and God bless the United States of America. Bye-bye.
I did some research. In the history of Supreme Court nomination hearings, military tribunals have never been brought up. There was a 5-minute discussion, as you outlined, between Lindsey Graham and Brett Kavanaugh about the constitutionality of military tribunals. Yes, they've been used in our country's history. Are they constitutional? Yes. Could they be used again? Yes.